Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me. I remember the exact moment she said it. Not because it was dramatic or heartbreaking. Quite the opposite, actually. It was so casual. Almost like she was discussing the weather. We need a break, she said. I'm not sure what I was expecting her to say. I guess I thought there'd be more emotion behind it. Some sign of hesitation, a little bit of struggle. But no. It was as if she was ordering a coffee. There was no warning. No preamble. Just those words, hanging in the air between us like a forgotten afterthought. I didn't answer immediately. I was still processing. A break? I asked, dumbfounded. She nodded, tapping her fingers lightly on the table, her eyes not quite meeting mine. It felt like a scene in a movie, something scripted, rehearsed, and utterly rehearsed, and yet I couldn't understand the lines. Yeah, just some space. I think we've both been a little too caught up in life, she explained, her voice soft, almost apologetic, but not entirely. The words were the same I had heard from friends, seen in movies, read in books. The space that so often led to something more. The words that signaled the beginning of an end. But I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready to hear her talk about our marriage like it was some sort of project that needed a timeout to be fixed. I felt like I had been handed a script that wasn't mine. The truth was, I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe that the woman I'd been married to for almost 10 years, the woman who I thought was my partner in every sense of the word, was asking for this. It felt too surreal, too out of place. How long? I finally asked, as if the answer would matter. Maybe a couple of weeks. Maybe longer. I'm not sure, she replied. A couple of weeks. That's what she thought she needed to get her head straight. A couple of weeks in a marriage that had taken years to build. I sat there for a long time, the words ringing in my ears. In my head, there was a constant loop of questions. Why now? What happened? What's going on? The silence between us was thick, suffocating. I could feel the weight of the air pressing down on me. But I couldn't bring myself to say anything more. Couldn't bring myself to argue. I had no idea what I was supposed to say. That night, I went to bed alone. She was still awake, but she didn't say anything more. I turned over in bed, my back facing her, pretending to sleep while her side of the bed remained untouched. We had been like that for months, at least emotionally. The distance between us had only grown as the days passed. But hearing her admit it, that was something I couldn't shake. The next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I didn't bring it up. I didn't ask any more questions. I didn't push for explanations. I pretended like everything was fine, like the last 24 hours hadn't happened. I went to work. I came home. I cooked dinner. We ate in silence, and then I went to bed, wondering if this was the beginning of the end. But deep down, I already knew it was. 2 days later, I got the call. It wasn't a phone call you expect to get from your wife. Not after a couple of days of space. It was from her best friend. A casual chat, or so it seemed at first. But I could hear the hesitation in her voice. The discomfort. She was struggling to make small talk, and that was unlike her. I didn't think anything of it at first, but when she finally spoke, I almost wished she hadn't. She told me, "Marcus," she said, her voice lowering, like she was confiding in me. She told me about what she's been feeling, and well, I think you should know, it's been a while. I didn't understand what she meant by, "it's been a while." I'm not sure I follow, I said, the words tasting strange in my mouth. There was a long pause. I could hear her shift on the other end, like she was searching for the right words. Then came the bombshell. She's been seeing someone else. I don't remember much of what I said after that. I don't remember the exact words, but I know I tried to ask more questions. I tried to piece it together, but all I could think about was that single, damning phrase. She's been seeing someone else. I was numb, utterly numb. The betrayal wasn't a sharp cut. It wasn't a sudden, violent impact. No, it was a slow realization that hit me over time. She hadn't just needed a break. She hadn't been confused or overwhelmed. She had already made her choice. And I had been too blind, too naive to see it. The next day, I went to our bedroom and opened the drawer where I kept the divorce papers. I had always told myself I'd never be the one to pull the trigger. I had always imagined that if things ever went south, she would be the one to walk away. But now I saw things differently. If she needed a break, I would give her the break she wanted, but it wouldn't be the one she was expecting. I printed out the divorce papers and filled them out in silence. I didn't need anyone's approval. I didn't need her to ask for it. I didn't even need her to understand. I had been living in a marriage that wasn't real, and now it was time to face the truth. When I placed the papers on the kitchen counter the next morning, I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The message was clear. If she wanted a break, then I was giving her the one she had truly asked for. The silence between us after that spoke louder than any words ever could. I didn't hear her coming that night. She always had a way of sneaking back into the house, making no sound, like she didn't want to be caught. But this time, I wasn't pretending to sleep. I knew exactly when she walked in. She tried to be quiet, but the door creaked as she pushed it open, and I could hear her soft footsteps against the hardwood floor. I kept my eyes closed, pretending to be asleep, not because I wanted to avoid confrontation, but because I needed a moment to process everything. I heard her pause for a moment, standing there in the doorway, maybe waiting for me to say something. But I didn't. I couldn't. The weight of what had happened felt too much to carry. So, I kept still, hoping she would just do the same. But she didn't. Instead, I heard the sound of her gently undressing, the rustle of sheets as she climbed into bed. There was no "I'm sorry" or "can we talk?" Nothing. Just silence. For the first time in years, the space between us felt so much larger than just the few feet that separated our bodies. I could feel her warmth next to me, but she felt as far away as someone on the other side of the world. I didn't even know what I expected from her. What was there left to say? She had already made her choice, and I had made mine. She had been gone long before that night, emotionally, mentally. I knew that now. The realization hit me like a brick wall. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I trusted, had left long before she physically walked away from me. The silence that followed was deafening. I wanted to ask her why. I wanted to scream, to shout at her for everything she had taken from me, but I didn't. I couldn't. I didn't have the energy anymore. My mind was racing, my heart was breaking, and yet I lay there, pretending to sleep, as she silently drifted into her own world. Morning came, and with it, the same uneasy quiet. She didn't bring it up. She didn't even mention the papers that were now sitting on the kitchen counter. I didn't either. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. It wasn't the kind of silence where you were waiting for things to be fixed, where you still held on to hope. No, this was the kind of silence where you both knew something was already broken and nothing was going to fix it. She made coffee, like it was just another morning, and I tried to eat breakfast, though I wasn't hungry. The whole morning felt like a farce. She sat across from me, her eyes focused on her phone, her fingers tapping mindlessly on the screen. I could see the walls around her, the coldness in her posture, and I hated it. The woman I had married, the woman who once held me close in the dark of the night, was now a stranger sitting across the table, absorbed in a world that didn't include me. I felt it again. The pull, that overwhelming desire to confront her, to demand an explanation. But I held back. I wasn't angry anymore. There was no more fire left inside me to burn. There was only a strange numbness that had taken over. The realization of what was happening, the realization that we had already reached the end, had settled in. I couldn't make her care. I couldn't make her choose me again. The papers were still on the kitchen counter, untouched, like an unspoken agreement. The one thing that had made it clear, this wasn't just a break. This was the end. I had done what I needed to do. Now it was her turn. She left the house that afternoon, no words, just a quick kiss on the cheek. I watched her go, and for the first time in months, I felt an unsettling sense of calm. There were no more questions to ask. There were no more hopes left to shatter. What was once mine was now a memory, a fading image that I could never get back. But I still hadn't told her everything. I hadn't told her how the papers weren't just a formality. They were a statement, a final act. If she wanted a break, I was giving her one she would never forget. She didn't come home that night. I didn't expect her to. Maybe she was staying with a friend. Maybe she was with him, whoever he was. I couldn't stop the thought from creeping into my mind, no matter how hard I tried to push it away. But I wasn't going to waste my time wondering where she was or who she was with. That chapter had been closed, and the papers on the kitchen counter were more than just a symbol. They were a reality. The next morning, the silence was even heavier. The absence of her presence in the house felt like a physical weight on my chest. I had spent countless hours trying to convince myself I could fix this, our marriage, our lives, but deep down, I knew the truth. She had made her decision. It wasn't just about needing space. It wasn't even about needing time to figure things out. She was already gone, and she had been for a while. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at those damn papers. I could feel my hand itching to grab them again, to sign my name, to make it final. But something held me back. Maybe it was the finality of it. Maybe it was the fear of what would happen next. I had never imagined my life without her in it, not truly. Sure, I had thought about the possibility, the hypothetical scenarios, but now it felt real. It felt terrifying. The phone rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. I wasn't in the mood for small talk, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. I picked up, not checking the caller ID first. Hello. It was her. Amelia's voice on the other end of the line was calm, almost too calm. It made my skin crawl. Marcus, I think we need to talk. I could feel my stomach drop. The words were simple, yet they carried so much weight. Talk. What was there left to say? I had already accepted what was happening. I had already let go. But she wanted to talk. Maybe she wanted to apologize. Maybe she wanted to explain herself. But I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it. I didn't answer right away. I just let her wait, let the silence between us hang in the air. I could hear her breathing, her soft sigh as she waited for me to say something. The ball was in my court now. I'm listening, I finally said, my voice sounding hollow even to me. She hesitated before speaking again, her words coming out slowly, carefully. I've been thinking about everything, about us, and I think I owe you an explanation. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her I didn't need an explanation, that there was nothing she could say that would change what had already been done. But I didn't. I wanted to hear her out, even if it was just to hear the lies one last time, to hear the way she would try to justify everything she had done. I know I've hurt you, she continued, her voice cracking slightly. I know I've made mistakes. But, Marcus, I didn't know how to handle things. I didn't know how to tell you, and I didn't want to lose you. The words felt empty, like a rehearsed speech. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But how could I? How could I believe anything she said after everything that had happened? How could I trust her when she had already broken my trust in the most devastating way? Then why, Amelia? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Why did you do it? Why did you choose him? There was a long pause. I could almost hear the wheels turning in her mind as she tried to figure out how to answer. It wasn't about him, Marcus. It was never about him. It was about me. About us. About everything I've been hiding from for so long. I scoffed, shaking my head. You think that makes it better? You think that's an excuse? Her voice faltered, and for the first time, I heard something in it, something real. No, I don't. I don't expect you to forgive me, Marcus. I don't even expect you to understand. But I need you to know that I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen. I stayed silent, the weight of her words settling in my chest. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to ask why she had waited so long to come clean, why she hadn't told me earlier, before it all spiraled out of control. But I didn't. I just sat there, listening to her voice, knowing that whatever she said, it wouldn't bring back what we had. I don't know if we can fix this, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. But I'm sorry. I'm really sorry for everything. The line went silent. I didn't hang up. I didn't even say goodbye. I just let the silence stretch on, feeling the finality of the moment settle over me. There was nothing more to say. I put the phone down, the weight of her apology lingering in the air, but it didn't change anything. The truth was, I had already made my decision. I had already signed the divorce papers. I had already decided that this was the end. And as I sat there, staring at the papers on the counter, I realized that I didn't need her explanation. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need anything from her anymore. Because in that moment, I finally understood. The break wasn't just her idea. It was mine too. The night she called, I didn't know what I was hoping for. I think I was just waiting for some kind of closure, some final confirmation that this wasn't all just a horrible nightmare. But even after hearing her words, the silence between us felt more final than anything she could say. I spent the rest of the evening alone, pacing around the house like a man trapped in a cage of my own making. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, and I couldn't escape the weight of everything that had happened. I had the papers right there, sitting on the counter. The divorce papers. The thing that could end all of this, that could put a stop to the charade. I kept staring at them, the blank lines waiting for my signature. It almost felt too easy. A part of me wanted to drag it out, to make her feel the pain I was feeling, but what was the point? There was no satisfaction in revenge. No satisfaction in holding on to something that had already crumbled. I picked up the pen. My hand shook as I signed the first line. The reality of it hit me harder than I expected. I thought I had been prepared for this, but seeing my name on the dotted line felt like I was signing away a piece of my soul. The finality of it wasn't lost on me. As soon as I signed, it was done. She would be gone. I would be gone. We would be two strangers walking through separate lives. I sat there for a long time, staring at the papers, trying to comprehend what had just happened. I couldn't bring myself to give them to her right away. Part of me was waiting for some kind of miracle, something that would make this all turn around. But deep down, I knew better. There was no turning back now. It was only after the silence had swallowed up every ounce of hope that I realized how much I had truly lost. The woman I had once trusted, the person I thought I knew better than anyone, she was now a stranger. And no matter how hard I tried to hold on to the past, it was already slipping through my fingers. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was knowing that I had been so blind, so willing to ignore the signs that were there all along. How did I not see it? How did I not notice her pulling away? Had I really been that naive? Or had I just chosen to ignore the obvious because I didn't want to face the truth? It was a bitter pill to swallow, but I had to accept it. The truth had been staring me in the face for months, maybe longer, and I had ignored it because I didn't want to lose everything. But I had lost it all. I glanced at the clock. It was late. She wasn't coming home tonight. I knew that much. She wasn't coming home ever again. And I had to accept that. I picked up the papers again, running my finger over the lines where her name would go. I hadn't signed them with anger or bitterness or resentment. I signed them with resignation. There was nothing more to say. No more waiting. I had made my decision. The morning after signing the papers, I felt strangely calm. It was a feeling I wasn't used to. Usually, in times like these, I'd be overwhelmed with anger or confusion. But now, there was only an eerie quiet. I didn't have to wait for Amelia to come home. Not really. I knew she wouldn't. She had already made her choice, and so had I. But part of me was still caught in the limbo of it all. The house felt different now. Empty, even though I was still living in it. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards, but none of it felt real. I sat in the living room for a while, staring at the window, watching the trees sway outside. I don't know what I was waiting for. Her to come back and apologize? For some kind of closure? I didn't know anymore. The phone buzzed. It was her again. I almost didn't pick up. I didn't know if I could handle hearing her voice right now, but curiosity got the best of me. I answered, keeping my tone as neutral as I could. Marcus, we need to talk. Her voice was calm, but there was something beneath it, something more frantic than she was letting on. I couldn't help but notice how she still sounded like she thought we could fix this. What more is there to say, Amelia? I asked, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. I had signed the papers. I had already made my peace with this. At least, I thought I had. I need to explain myself, she said, and there was a brief pause. I could hear her taking a breath, like she was gathering her thoughts. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. Explain what? I asked, though I already knew the answer. She needed to justify what had happened. She needed me to hear the reasons behind her betrayal. But why? Did it even matter at this point? I know I've hurt you, she said softly, but this time, it didn't sound like an apology. It sounded like a script she had rehearsed over and over in her mind. And I'm sorry for that. But I need you to understand something. It wasn't just about him. It wasn't about someone else. I couldn't stop the sharp laugh that escaped my throat. Then what was it about, Amelia? What was it about if not him? Because I don't know how else to explain what you've done to me. You've broken everything. I heard her sigh, a long, drawn-out breath. I don't expect you to understand. I don't expect you to forgive me. Her voice cracked for a second, and it was the first time I heard the vulnerability in her words. I never meant for it to happen like this, Marcus. But I felt like I was losing myself. I didn't know how to fix it, she trailed off. Is that it? I asked, my voice rising now, frustration creeping in. You didn't know how to fix it, so you checked out? You didn't try to talk to me, to work through it? You didn't think about what you were doing to me? There was silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing, but there was nothing else. No more excuses. No more words. I waited for her to say something, anything, but she didn't. And in that moment, I realized she was as lost as I was. She wasn't calling for reconciliation. She was calling for herself, to ease her own guilt, her own regrets. She wasn't fighting for us anymore. She was just trying to make peace with her actions. You don't need to explain yourself anymore, I said, cutting through the silence. My words felt final, but I wasn't sure if they were for me or for her. I've already made my decision. I signed the papers. There was another long pause, and I could almost feel her shock through the phone. I didn't have to explain any further. I didn't have to give her the satisfaction of a response. She was already gone, even if she was still holding on to the hope that somehow we could come back from this. I'm sorry, Marcus, she said, her voice breaking. I really am. I know. It was all I could manage, and I hung up before she could say anything more. I set the phone down, and for a moment, everything felt still. The calm was back, but this time, it wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. The truth was clear now. She wasn't coming back, and I didn't want her to. But even as the words echoed in my mind, a part of me still wasn't ready to let go. I didn't know how I was going to move forward, or even if I could. All I knew was that the man I had been before wasn't the same man I was now. I had changed, and I was done waiting for her to change too. It had been 3 days since the phone call. 3 days of silence. I'd heard nothing from Amelia after that night, and frankly, I hadn't expected to. It wasn't like before, when we would text and call each other throughout the day. The space she'd asked for had stretched far beyond anything I could have anticipated. But then, the letter came. I wasn't expecting it. I came home from work to find it sitting on the kitchen counter. There it was, the thick envelope with my name written in her familiar handwriting. I don't know why, but something in me hesitated. I stood there for a few seconds, just staring at it. I wasn't ready to open it. Not yet. I thought back to the way things had been, how everything had been easy, how we'd talked about everything and nothing. Now, all that was left was this. A letter. I had already signed the divorce papers, yet here she was, trying to reach me one more time, trying to explain herself in ways she never could before. I sat down at the kitchen table, turning the envelope over in my hands. It felt heavy, as if it held everything she hadn't said to me in person. I couldn't stop myself. I tore it open and unfolded the letter. Marcus, it began. The words were written with care, but I could already tell there was something different in the way she spoke. It was almost like she was writing from a place of finality. I don't know if you'll ever read this, or if you'll even care after everything that's happened, but I couldn't leave things like this. I couldn't leave you thinking that I didn't care, that I didn't love you. The letter went on, detailing everything she had kept buried for so long. Her insecurities, her struggles, how she had felt lost in our marriage before everything went wrong. It was a sob story, a collection of excuses, and yet, something about it felt sincere. She told me about the pressure she had felt, how she had never felt truly seen or heard by me, how she had convinced herself that she was losing her identity in our relationship. And then, she said something that struck me hard. I never meant to hurt you. But somewhere along the way, I forgot how to love myself. And in forgetting that, I hurt you. I didn't know how to feel. A part of me wanted to cry, to feel sorry for her. But the other part of me, the part that had been left in pieces, was angry. I had given her everything. And now, she was telling me this? Telling me she had been lost while I was living right next to her, trying to hold us together? I read on, my mind racing. She apologized again and again, but each apology felt hollow. She described how she had come to the decision to be with someone else. The words "it just happened" appeared in the letter more than once, and each time, it made me feel smaller. Was this her justification? The "it just happened" excuse? She ended the letter with a final plea. I know I've ruined us, Marcus, but I hope, in time, you can forgive me. I hope you find the peace I couldn't give you. I put the letter down, my hands shaking. I couldn't tell if I wanted to throw it across the room or keep it, as if it would somehow explain everything. The letter didn't make me feel better. It didn't make her betrayal easier to accept. It just left me with more questions. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The papers were signed. The decision was made. But somehow, this letter felt like one last attempt to pull me back into her world, into a world I had already decided to leave behind. I stared at the paper for a while, the words blurring in front of me. I didn't know what was worse, the fact that she thought this letter would fix everything, or the realization that I was finally ready to let go. But I still couldn't throw it away. Instead, I folded the letter back up and placed it in the drawer with the divorce papers. That was it. She had said her piece, and now I had mine. It was over, and I was finally free. The days after I read Amelia's letter felt strangely heavy. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't finished, that the finality of it all was slipping away from me. I'd signed the divorce papers. I'd received her apology. And yet, the truth was, I wasn't entirely sure I was ready for the aftermath. The silence in the house, the emptiness of it all, was overwhelming. I spent my days lost in my thoughts, trying to figure out who I was now. Who was I without her? I kept the letter in the drawer, just as I had left it. There were no more texts, no more phone calls. Amelia had gone silent, and I didn't know if that was a relief or a curse. My world had shrunk down to the small corners of my own mind, each thought circling back to the same question: how did I let it get this far? It wasn't until a week later that I realized I had been avoiding something important. I hadn't filed the divorce papers yet. I had signed them, yes, but I hadn't taken that final step. I hadn't handed them over to a lawyer or sent them in. Maybe part of me was still waiting for her to fight for us, to give me one last reason to stay. But I knew better now. I wasn't waiting for her anymore. I was waiting for myself. I drove to the lawyer's office one morning, the papers in the passenger seat next to me. I felt strange, as if I was heading to some kind of execution. This was it. This was the moment that would separate everything: my past with Amelia, my life before, from the future I was about to step into. The lawyer, a tall woman with sharp features and an efficient smile, greeted me as I walked in. She took the papers from me with a professional air, flipping through them before looking up at me. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice neutral, but I could hear the curiosity there. "Once we file these, there's no turning back." I nodded. I had been sure for days. I had thought it over, processed it, and at this point, there was no other option. Amelia had made her choice, and I had made mine. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life holding on to something that had already slipped through my fingers. "Absolutely," I said, my voice steady. "It's time." The lawyer smiled sympathetically, then made a few quick notes before standing to file the papers. She handed me the receipt and some other documents to sign. The weight of it all finally hit me. This was really happening. As I left the office, the feeling was surreal. The finality of it settled in like a fog, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to feel. It wasn't happiness or relief. It wasn't even sadness. It was a strange mix of numbness and something else I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was just the exhaustion from everything, the years of pretending things were fine when they weren't. I drove back home, not rushing, just taking my time. The house was quiet when I arrived. It was still my house, but it didn't feel like it anymore. I couldn't tell if it was because Amelia wasn't there or because everything I had once believed in had been shattered. I sat on the couch for a while, looking around at the empty space. The walls that once felt like a sanctuary now seemed cold, foreign. I ran my hand over the coffee table, tracing the lines of the wood, remembering when we'd picked it out together. Everything in this house had a story, a memory attached to it. But none of that mattered anymore. I realized that I was no longer the man I used to be. I was no longer the person I thought I was, the one who had trusted, who had hoped, who had believed that love could conquer all. The divorce was now official. Amelia was gone. And now, it was just me. For the first time in years, I felt a little lighter. The weight that had been pressing down on me for so long had lifted, and I knew it wasn't because of Amelia or her apology, but because I had finally taken control. I had made the decision. And for the first time in a long time, I was starting to feel like myself again. It wasn't the end I had imagined, but it was my new beginning. The days that followed felt like I was waking up from a long, exhausting dream. The heaviness that had followed me around for months started to lift, and though I couldn't deny the pain, there was a sense of clarity I hadn't had in a long time. I was no longer bound by the uncertainty of my marriage, no longer trapped in the cycle of her betrayal and my own willingness to forgive. I was free. I threw myself into work, not as an escape, but as a way to reclaim something I had lost, my sense of purpose. I hadn't realized how much of myself I had given away until I started getting it back piece by piece. I spent weekends with friends, rekindling relationships I had neglected, and even started a new hobby I'd always been interested in but never had time for. Slowly but surely, I was rediscovering who I was, who I could be without her. And then, just when I thought I was beginning to move forward, Amelia reappeared. It was a Sunday afternoon when I received a text from an unknown number. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of me. The message was simple, almost desperate. Marcus, I need to talk. I'm sorry for everything. I've made a huge mistake. Please, just give me a chance to explain. I almost laughed out loud. After everything, after all the pain, the lies, and the years I'd spent trying to hold on to something that was already broken, she had the nerve to come crawling back? But this time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't even hurt. I replied, but I didn't give her what she was hoping for. Instead, I wrote, "There's nothing to explain, Amelia. You had your chance. I've moved on." A part of me thought she might be reaching out because she felt guilty, but another part of me thought she might be trying to get back into my life. Either way, I wasn't going to let her. Not this time. She had chosen her path, and I had chosen mine. But what happened next was something I never expected. About a month later, I ran into her, unexpectedly, at a mutual friend's gathering. She looked different, thinner, her smile not quite as bright as it used to be. And standing next to her was someone else. Another man. Younger, more confident. She didn't see me at first, but when she did, her eyes widened. She quickly pulled the man aside, whispering something to him, her eyes darting back and forth nervously. I watched it all unfold with a calm I hadn't known I was capable of. I wasn't angry. I didn't feel the rush of betrayal. Instead, I felt pity for her, for the choices she had made. She had wanted freedom, space, and yet here she was, still stuck in the same cycle of seeking validation from others, never facing what she had done. As the evening went on, Amelia came over to me, her face flushed with embarrassment. Marcus, I just want to say I'm sorry. I know you're probably angry, but I didn't mean for things to turn out this way. I stopped her before she could say more. Amelia, I said, my voice steady, I'm done being angry. I'm done caring about your mistakes. But I hope, for your sake, you'll find peace with the choices you've made. She didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there, staring at me. And then, with a quiet nod, she walked away, this time, for good. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel the satisfaction of revenge. Instead, I felt relieved. The weight of her presence in my life was finally gone. I was free from the past. A few weeks later, I found out that the man she had been with at the gathering was someone she had started dating shortly after we split. The irony of it wasn't lost on me. She had moved on, just as I had. But this time, there would be no more chances. No more forgiveness. She had already burned that bridge. And the truth was, I was grateful. Because I knew that I had chosen a better path for myself. I was stronger now, more certain of who I was and what I wanted. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about living my life on my terms, free from the ghosts of the past. The happiness I had searched for in her, I found in myself. And that was something no one, not even Amelia, could take away from me. I smiled as I looked out the window, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. Life was beginning anew, and I was ready to embrace it. Please like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all.